This is the second video of the series Dispossession, how it is that I know everything but still absolutely nothing about reality. My name is Wani, I'm a philosophy student at La Sorbonne, and I'm currently extremely interested in epistemology and aesthetics, and this series is also based on that book, which is Notre Humanité by Wolff. And this video is how man defines reality. We're gonna start with Aristotle's natural man, how it is that he defines it. Then after that, we'll talk about Descartes' the knowing being or the knowing subject. And then after that, I will just talk a bit about the consequences of the different conceptions, methodological conceptions from Aristotle to Descartes, and how it is that it is what led to the foundation of physical science or the natural sciences. Let us begin with Aristotle's The Natural Man. Page 36, l'homme relève de la méthode des sciences naturelles. Réciproquement, l'homme est le modèle de tous les êtres naturels. Toute la conception aristotélicienne de la nature dépend donc de l'essence de l'homme et de la place éminente qu'il occupe au centre du monde. Man is from the method of natural sciences. Reciprocally, man is the model of all natural beings. All Aristotelian conception of nature depends on the essence of man and his imminent place that occupies the center of the world. I'm not making a social commentary, but I am making a social commentary and saying that I'm not making a social commentary. But the idea and the important thing about this part is just to say that how it is that man conceives nature is based on the essence of man. So the essence of man is what is that defines nature, and that it's because he's the center of the world. And in this way, science is a response to a question of qu'est-ce que c'est, what is. Connaître quelque chose, quoi que ce soit, c'est savoir en déterminer par le langage les contours singuliers. To know something, whatever it is to know in determining by language its singular contours. This is a very big topic, but on the foundational knowledge of Aristotle, the most important thing is the fact that you're able to isolate an object and fix it and make it stable. I talked a bit about this in the first video, so if you haven't, please go back and watch that. So definition is not the simple equivalent, verbal equivalent to a noun, but it is the precise determination of essence of the thing, which allows ensuite, after that, to identify the reason of being, raison d'être, which is the principe, which is the condition to exist. This is the methodological side of this. So now we're gonna go deeper into qu'est-ce que l'homme, like what is man. It is by genre, which is en vivant, zoon, qui possède la vie. So the essence of the man by type is that he's a living being that possesses life. So to live is defined by three characteristics. One, the power to continually reproduce oneself, which is by nutrition, eating, metabolism. The second is the capacity to produce something that is like you, which is generation. And the third is the capacity to feel and to desire. What Aristotle does is that we have what is living, but then what is human living. So we have bien vivre, to live well. So le bonheur, happiness, is something that cannot be realized, which is the essence of man, if he is not in coexistence with his semblable, those who resemble him. And this is why that the essence of man, an animal which is in relation to other animals, but politique also implies not just coexistence like in the animal kingdom, but logos and reason, which is something that only man has that animals don't. It's the only animal that perceives moral values, animal which has language, reason, or logic, which is what I said. In Ethique à Nicomaque, human happiness, to live a life of action accompanied by reason. Again, if you haven't watched my video on my critique on psychiatry, definitely recommend it. But to go back to this, page 35, so la cause de l'humanité, the cause of humanity, which is the cause of all the human properties, all other human properties, seems to be logos, in the sense that it is the faculty of reasoning and also the possibility of exchanging, of having a dialogue, and of opposing different moral values. That you can realize your essence by communicating your thoughts to your semblable, your equals, to talk about what is just and unjust. The language faculty, which enables us to orient our lives in the city and to express our opinions based on the common good. So you see here that language is literally the thing that positions you within the society, and it positions you because this is the way that you find out where you are in relation to other people within the city. So based on the fact that you can talk about what is just and unjust, based on the fact that you can compare and oppose your moral values, based on the fact that you can express yourself, this is how it is that you find your orientation in life. And by extension, and I don't want to go too far, but once you have an orientation in life, you have a sense of life, a sense of direction or a sense of meaning. So it is through language that we are able to navigate or understand the world, or at least our world, or however we perceive the world. This is not what Aristotle says, but that's how I interpret it. The look of man, it is objective and exterior. It is naturalistic. It's never in the point of view of psychology or sociology. It is never a reflective act of subjective introspection or transcendental interrogations. So there's no metaphysics, which is really hard for me to say because I haven't read Aristotle's metaphysics yet, but I have heard a professor says that his definition of metaphysics is not in the way that we think of Descartes' metaphysics. But I'll stop here. But from what I understand it, when we say that it's not a transcendental interrogation, it just means that we're based on nature. We're based on observable things that exist effectively in nature. And in this way, we arrive at the hylémorphique modèle de l'homme. Hylé is matière, morphique is form. So hylé, matière, nature, and then morphé, forme, essence. And in this way, you're going to see the consequences of when Descartes splits it into two, because you have the reflective notion of I'm the subject and then I use my thought to study something and then I come back to myself. But here we don't have any of that. We just see everything from the outside, from nature, from living to living well, to seeing how all animals, what they do, how they all have life, to distinguishing man. And I do this because Aristotle is really about hierarchy, to distinguish man in terms of the fact that he has logos, but at the same time, he is hylémorphique because he is a political animal. It's included by the fact that his form and his essence are both required as a unity for us to arrive at what man is. Before we get to Descartes, an important transition to mention is Christianity. So this was something that I saw before when I had my class on the subject, but in this book it mentions it quite briefly, which is Christianity in terms of the interpretation of the rational man of il est l'esprit dans chair. He is spirit, an immortal soul in flesh, in a mortal body. Here we start to see this kind of like, the hylémorphique, no longer one thing. We start having a divide. And this Christianity, this perspective or interpretation of the rational animal, plus the new sciences, and the new sciences is general laws that links events and phenomenon thanks to the mathemization of nature. So what does this mean? Basically, for us to make different contingent events commensurable, comparable, we need math. Because through math and through calculation, we can go like similarities and values, and then we can put them all into one plan. This is given to us by Galileo, Descartes, and Newton. So now that we have this transition, let's talk a bit about Descartes, the knowing subject or the knowing being. He defines man as une union d'une âme et d'un corps. It is a union between the soul and the body. The difficult thing about this is that this word of union, because union itself implies that there is a separation between two distinct substances, the thinking substance and the corporal substance. So before we had Descartes, where we define man in the third person, and it is the effect of the specification of the exterior. So again, like the whole fact that we went from all living beings to man by the fact that he has logos, and this is the characteristic that makes him this specific animal. Descartes, on the other hand, is where we define ourselves in the first person, je or I. So this is the fruit of the generalization of the interior. It is the mathemization that enables finding a common characteristics to multiple singular objects. So what do I mean by the generalization of the interior? I personally don't mean anything by it. I just quoted the book. But from my understanding about the generalization of the interior is the fact that all of us have the cogito, or at least all man has it, because apparently Descartes says that thinking and having existential crisis is really exhausting, and it's not befitted to Princess Elizabeth, who asked him questions he couldn't answer. So before I go further into Descartes, the way the book was structured is actually quite brilliant, where he talks about the objectivist look and the introspective look. So the objectivist look, and again, now we're talking when we look, we're not looking at the man, we're looking at how it is that we ask questions or how we try to get knowledge about reality. So in the Aristotelian sense, the objectivist look is on all natural beings, and it is that we are looking at all objects of knowledge, like things that we know, the objects to know. So the question of what is an animal. The second is the introspective look, which is we turn our looking, ton regard, son regard, sur lui-même. We start from asking ourselves, as the subject of knowledge. So the subject in terms of substrat, the thing that holds itself or the thing that starts accumulating or attaining knowledge, one that knows. So we go from asking the question, qu'est-ce qu'un animal? What is an animal outside in front of me? To qui suis-je? Like, who am I? Combination leads us to qu'est-ce que l'homme? What is man? So in terms of Aristotle, we see man as the rational animal. And this means that he is an animal that has logos, that has reason. The reason why he's still an animal is because he is one that has reason. So in this way, man is still a part of nature. But with Descartes, we jump into this thing of this is exactly why we have nothing to do with animals. So, je suis pensant et rationnel. Penser, something that is a trait that's completely opposite to animality, and raison, something that animals do not have. Pas même un genre ontologique, so a different category of being, and we're not the same substance. The important takeaway here is essentially, yes, one is reason and one is thinking, and you think it's the same thing, but based on their definition of how it is that relates us or not relates us to nature is something to be taken into account in terms of how we arrive from objectivity to subjectivity and interiority. And to take this distinction further, we're going to see the consequences of dividing substances into two parts. Again, if you remember with Aristotle, the hyle morphique, man is defined in unity of his essence and his matter, the fact that he's of nature and the fact that his essence as a speaking political animal. And if you're ready, this is the two parts, and forgive my pronunciation because I'm learning Greek and not Latin, is res cognitans and res extensa. So res cognitans is the soul, it is the thinking substance, and it is all interiority without exteriority. So it's like a huge cleavage. And then the other hand, res extensa, which is le corps, the body, the extended substance, and it is all exteriority without any interiority. And nature, in this sense, we're no longer a part of nature because now we're thinking of introspection as like the primauté, like the first thing or the most important in terms of knowledge. So having this distinction, the consequences of this separation is that on the one side, you have rationality, knowing as clear and distinct, and then you have the other side, which is your sentiments and your passion. So your sentiments are your perceptions, like the five senses, and your emotions, and your passion is the thing that affects your body. So like you're hungry, pain, and thirst. And the difficulty with this is that we are always in conflict between how it is that we can try to identify what reality is. And that's how you get the cogito and the doubt. But to go to the sixth meditation, sentiments are the confused way of thinking that comes from and is dependent on the union between the mix of the body and the soul. What are we able to do so that we can escape this confusion in knowledge, or like basically hope to have any knowledge of reality? The solution is to think separately. You have the thinking substance and then you have the extended substance. The thinking substance is l'essence de ce qui permet à l'homme de connaissance. It is the essence that allows man to think. It is to know without the body. The second, which is extended substance, l'essence de ce qui lui est donné de pouvoir connaître. It is the thing that gives us this capacity to know. So the thing that gives me capacity to know is this thing outside of me. Because if I am going to be conscious of something, there needs to be something that I'm conscious about. So one is the capacity to know clearly, and the thing in front of me is the thing that enables me to like s'appuie, something that I can lean on so that I can actually know reality because it's a physical thing in front of me. There isn't any knowledge if there's nothing to know about. The first part, again, it's the fact that you can know clearly, and the other is the object that I can clearly know. But Wolff writes this critique on Descartes, which basically says that he can explain the separation of substance but not the union itself. Therefore, Descartes can't explain man. And this goes past the point of this series, but it is an important critique to know about Descartes. But before I finish this section on Descartes, I think it's worth mentioning my favorite quote from the Metaphysical Meditations. It's in the fourth meditation, which is Je suis comme en milieu entre Dieu et le néant. I am in the middle of God and nothingness. So I actually wrote a bit of a commentary about this in one of my assignments for extériorité, which is where we studied Heidegger and Husserl. By separating subjectivity from the objectivity of the exterior world, the subject finds itself between what is supremely positive, what is supremely knowable, which is God, and néant, which is himself. Autrement dit, said differently, this subjectivity, which is us, we always refer to this perfect infinite positivity, which is God, that doesn't belong to us and doesn't belong to our cogito, because if you remember or if you know, the cogito of subjectivity is based on doubts. It's radical doubt. You doubt so much until you reduce yourself to the point of, okay, here's how I start. But the only reason why you can escape this doubt is because you believe that there's this kind and never lying being that is God that can lead you to knowledge and free you from doubt. But in this way, man itself, as its cogito, is one that kind of knows nothing unless he has a relationship to God. And there are two main things that I understand that actually leads us to doubt. One is malingénie. There's this like creature that always lies to us or can always trick us. And second is the fact that, again, we are this confused way of thinking between the body and the soul. Because even if you want to separate your sensations in your body, in the end, we are connected. So it's going to happen eventually. The thing to just take away from Descartes is the idea that we are able to reach knowledge and we're knowing because we have the help of God. So even though I said like in the end we're negativity and we can't have complete knowledge, that is one side of it until you reach the point where you have God that reassures the fact that you actually can. It's time to go to the third part, which is the consequences of this change in methodology, the why. So the main consequence between the change of this methodology is that it actually is the foundation of modern science. We go from cause finale, which is the essence of the man, so we identify things based on their reason of being, to cause motrice efficiente. Okay, so I moved the camera and I hope this is okay, but what I was trying to say is that there are many ways to explain cause motrice. You know, there's God, but there's also this one section that I thought helped explain this transition into modern physics, which is from Principe de la philosophie. This is the generalization of the exterior. So there's only one matter in the universe that we know, and that is extension. So my professor mentioned that there's a difference between apercevoir and percevoir. So apercevoir is when we see something in terms of its first qualities, things that can be divided, and percevoir is secondary qualities, so like color. But again, like oh my god, like sometimes you know too much and you don't know if they make sense together, but they probably won't because all these authors are from different times of reality and historicity. But the question about color is very questionable thanks to Goethe's book on the theory of colors, I think it's called. Yeah, I'm right. I just checked. Yeah, theory of colors. If you haven't watched my video on Berkeley, I recommend it because I went through the distinction between primary and secondary qualities. But to continue with this translation, it's basically saying that whatever we can identify distinctly is what is that which can be divided and moved according to its parts. And this is how you get two things: the mathemization of something where everything is comparable because it is quantifiable, it is dividable, and also how it is that you see the causal effects of it. So here we're in Descartes, which is basically the primacy of primary qualities, that we can see its diverse disposition, state of being, or you can say like effects or where it's at, that we can see that it can happen to it based on the movement of its part, which is cause. So in this way, you can kind of see that the separation of soul and body, and then the distinctions that are made, that it's quantifiable, the fact that it's mathematized, has its consequences into how it is that we arrive at modern physics or Newtonian physics. Before we reach the end, let's just see this progression. So this is about nature, and before, nature, according to Aristotle, is treated in terms of man is at the top of the hierarchy of nature based on the fact that he has logos. So in this way, l'homme est l'objet par l'excellence de la science et modèle de l'être naturel. So man is the object par excellence, the height of science and the model of natural being. So everything is defined based on how it is that we define man in relation to nature. Whereas in Descartes, nature is just treated as matter, like flat. It's homogeneity, like the fact that it's all the same. You can mathematize it, you can cut it up, and you can compare all of it. And in this way, l'homme est sujet de la science de la nature. Man is the person that is able to look at nature and dissect nature outside of itself, and it's no longer a part of nature. It's one that is the strata that accepts and accumulates knowledge of this exterior world. Okay, I know that this is a lot of information to process, but I think it's really important to understand how it is that we build up to the argument of structuralism. To understand, yes, there's a development between Aristotle and Descartes up to modern physics, but the thing to remember is that it's not commensurable in terms of, okay, we no longer live in the paradigm or the optics of Aristotle. We no longer live, in the classical conception of man. It is not true. I think like we retain different elements from all of them. what I think is the biggest takeaway is that first we see things objectively because man is a part of nature, and because of that, he's never fully outside of it, and we see things in terms of its essence, which is in a way incommensurable. You cannot compare one essence to another essence. Whereas in Descartes' sense, because we are separated, our body and our spirit, and also that we are completely now separated from the exterior world, what happens is that for us to make sense out of that, the consequences of that is that we find a way to generalize and mathematize the thing that is outside of us. The point is that these are two ways that we have chosen to give reason to the human experience, whether it be as the living being or the thinking being. And both of it contributes to this foundational system of study of the universality of laws. The mathematization given by Descartes, but also from the idea of objectivity from Aristotle, and the fact that the world does revolve around the observer, the human who is observing nature. So I hope you found this helpful, and once you're ready, head on to the third video, which is how social reality defines man. I thank you for your time. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.